Welcome to a series that we call The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to try our best to see what it is we can expect to happen in the end times, as well as what is it we could expect to be doing in the end times, because we all have a role. And as we've gone through the book of Revelation, where we are in the book is John has been taken up into the throne room of God, where he sees all these things going on. And he notices that God has a scroll in his hand, and there are 7 seals written on that scroll, and is determined that only Jesus is worthy to open that scroll and break those 7 seals. And as those 7 seals are broken, events take place on earth that are mostly caused by the evil hearts of men. But what is written within that scroll is the divine coming of God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. The second coming of Jesus Christ and his reign on the earth, his literal ruling on this earth. And that begins in the form of 7 trumpets by 7 angels. And all of those trumpet blasts lead to terrible events caused on the earth. These events are caused by God and angels being obedient to God. And as we get to that 7th trumpet blast, the return of Jesus Christ, there's a pause in the story where we're introduced to several characters. In chapter 12, we were introduced to the woman who is Israel, and she gives birth to a child who is Jesus Christ. And we're introduced to the dragon who is Satan and is trying to stop, essentially, God's rule on earth because he wants to be God on earth. And that means war breaks out in heaven, and once he realizes that he is unable to stop the coming of Jesus Christ, he then turns his attention towards the saints and tries to kill them. And now we get to chapter 13, and we're introduced to the beast of the sea. Now, we're going to spend several episodes on the beast because at no point am I going to say, well, here's who I think it is, or here's which country I think this person's from, until we get to the end of this chapter 13, and then I'll give you my 2 cents on it. But until then, we're just going to take it verse by verse. And we started in chapter 13, verse 1 last time, and that's where we're going to pick it up. Chapter 13, verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Now last time, as we were introduced to this beast, we referred back to Daniel chapter 7, where he also sees this beast and is explained to him. And mostly what we focused on last time was what this beast is doing, which he is declaring himself to be God. He will sit in the throne of the temple, declare himself to be God, and at that moment, there is then a 3.5-year clock that begins to tick. That is a war between the world and the Antichrist and the remnant of Jesus Christ, which is essentially Christian Jews and a multitude of Christians from other countries, nations, and tongues. And the Antichrist is going to essentially kill all of them. Now God protects them for 3.5 years, but in the end, the Antichrist will prevail and overcome them and kill them. And that's where we kind of turned our focus last time, because as Daniel saw this beast, that's how it was explained to him, was that this is what the end result is, the coming of Jesus Christ, and the saints will then rule on earth with Jesus. So it's a very victorious ending, and it's interesting how in Daniel they explain the victorious ending, which we'll eventually get to here in Revelation as well. But what is this beast? This is a crazy beast. Let's just go through it piece by piece. It has 7 heads, and it has 10 horns. And on its horns there are 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. So let's kind of pause there for a second, because in Daniel, an angel does explain to him what this is. So we're just going to go back to Daniel 7 again. It's very important, as we go through Revelation, a lot of times we, of course, go back to other prophets and hear, especially when other prophets have seen the same thing that John is seeing, which is the case here in 7. So we're going to pick it up in 7, and we're going to go to verse 7. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. And that's kind of what we talked about last time, like what is it doing here? It was different from all the other beasts that there were before it. And it had 10 horns. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, and there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. And then the angel goes on to explain to him what this fourth beast is after he tells him about the coming of Jesus Christ and the consequences of this beast being thrown into the fiery flames by Jesus. Because again, I want to reiterate, Revelation's a beautiful story. It has a beautiful ending. But we're going to pick it up now. What is this beast? We'll go to verse 23, Daniel 7, verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings. All right, hold that thought for a second. So what we're looking at is we're looking at a 10-king kingdom. All right, just kind of hold that thought, and we'll come back to it. The 10 horns are 10 kings, whom shall rise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. So ultimately what the angel is saying here is what you have is you have 10 kings from this kingdom. This beast is from. It's a world kingdom. So you have 10 kings that are coming from here. And then somebody essentially uproots 3 of those kings. They overthrow 3 of the kings, which then leads to the 7 that they have. They attack the saints, they overcome the saints, and they prevail. And this goes on for 3.5 years is ultimately what Daniel is saying here in Revelation, or in Daniel. So if we go back to Revelation then, kind of take another look at this beast here in 13, this will kind of hopefully come to make a little bit of sense here. Then I stood on the sand of the sea. Now, last time we talked about the sea. Now, this is a sea. There was a sea in the throne room of God. And John is in the throne room of God. And typically, when something comes out of the sea, it's coming from the whole earth. It's different tongues, it's different nations, different tribes, different things. So this is a kingdom of the whole world. It's coming up out of the sea. And I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horn 10 crowns. So what you have is ultimately you had 10 horns, you had 10 crowns, but 3 of them have been uprooted. So now you have essentially 7 heads remaining in this beast. And on his head a blasphemous name. So what you have here is ultimately you have a kingdom of 10 kings, and 3 of them are overthrown by somebody. Now we're going to get into, as we continue in 13, there's more than one beast here, because Daniel saw a beast with 10 crowns, then another crown was raising up out of those 10 crowns. Now what John is seeing is these 10 crowns, and he sees the result of those 3 kings being destroyed. 3 of the heads are gone. They've been cut off. You had 10 crowns, now you only got 7 heads, but 10 crowns. And ultimately what they're going to do at this point is they're going to war against the saints. Now this second, or this little horn coming up that Daniel talks about, we're going to talk about the beast from the land probably in about 4 more episodes. It's further in chapter 13, but you know, the beast, the 10 kingdom beasts, or the 7 kings that are ruling this thing, one of them will be given some great authority, and we're going to kind of get into that, like who is that, like what's this one king all about. But then this other beast is going to kind of force everybody to worship that one guy. So kind of hang in there. But where we're at now is John sees a beast coming up, and what he's seeing is he's seeing the empire of the end times, and that is starting with 3 kings It's a world empire, or 10 kings. 3 of those kings are overthrown by just one, and now you're left with 7, and that's kind of where we're at now. They've warred against the saints. So we're just kind of get into next time, what's the leopard, what's the bear, what's the lion, what does all that mean? And then one of these is going to take a mortal head wound, and then everybody's going to be forced to worship him. So it's going to be kind of going to get crazy here in a little bit, but I just want to kind of keep it simple. A literal beast does not rule the world. What John is seeing is the spiritual beast that is ruling essentially these 10 kings, which ultimately 3 are overthrown, leading to 7. And eventually those 7 will run this new world order, and one of them will take a fatal head wound, and everybody will be forced to worship that one. So stay with us. Hopefully this video is helping. Again, the beast, I just want to take some time as we go through the beast verse by verse. We're looking at several chapters here. For sure all of chapter 13, and then we're going to get into it again in chapter 17 and 18. But when we get to the end of 13, it's all going to be crystal clear. But just be aware that the Antichrist stems from a new world order that will rule the whole world. It'll be composed of 10 kings. 3 of them will be overthrown by just one of those, and then 7 of them will remain. One of them will be forced to worship. So just hang in there, and I guarantee by the time we get to 13, all this is going to be crystal clear. We just have to take it verse by verse, and sometimes when you do that, it's not real clear until you get to the end of the chapter. So this is definitely going to be one of those cases, but all we're as long as you got this point now, is you have a new world order run by 10 kings. 3 of them are overthrown, 7 remain, and 1 will stand up and be the Antichrist and declare himself to be God. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Put it in the comments below. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you feel called to support this channel through Patreon, that link is also below. But the most important part of this channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.